Welcome back. I'm returning now for a conversation with my good friend David Thornburg. Part of what we're trying to do here, David, we're looking at, for the teachers that we're working with, starting first, because as we said, we have to begin with the teachers. We're looking at the fact that the day is prescribed. They're going to be distributed all over the country, and yet we need to find a way to be able to bring them together in a professional learning community that goes beyond the bell at the end of the day or the commute at nighttime. And when they get the projects going that we're talking about here, part of it's going to be a blended model. Part of it is going to be what's going on in the day, but most of it is going to be what's going on in the virtual world that the kids live in when they form their own groups. What have you seen about communication and collaboration as it happens among scientists and professionals that could be mirrored as it might happen among teachers or among students beyond just the physical building of the school? How can we extend that through time and space using the technology?
Well, I think one of the really powerful tools that is being incorporated a lot in schools is a program called Moodle, which allows everything from real-time chats to time-delayed conversations, calendaring, things of that sort. We're also seeing other commercial tools being used. There are lots of tools out there, and I think there are certainly adequate tools. Skype, for example, which is a free program that most people who use it use just for telephone calls, actually has video conferencing capabilities built into it. So it's not the access to the tools, it's the access to a couple of things. One of them is understanding that online interactions, I think, are very, very different from face-to-face interactions. I teach part-time at Walden University, which all of my courses are taught online. And I have to confess that I really miss the face-to-face contact with my students. But it's impossible to have because while the bulk of the students are in the US, though two of them are in the same city, I have another student, a grad student who's in Guyana, and a fellow who goes back and forth between the US and Kenya. So online learning is the way that that's going to happen. And we find that the way to make online learning work, at least in our context, is to not just do online lectures, but to perhaps assign readings in this particular case of the course that I work with, readings or viewings, and then have group commentary, have students interacting with each other, have them interacting with me, having them do multimedia projects that they post, all these kinds of things. Now, 10, 15 years ago, this was hard for many people to do. Now, with the advent of things like YouTube and Flickr and everything else, it becomes almost trivially easy for people to take their creative ideas that they develop around curricular content areas and share them not just with their local community, other people who may be going through the same program with them, but with the world at large.
Great, great. I'm glad to hear you say that. I'd like to, with your permission, have your reaction to just a sampling of some of the project ideas that we're going to be exploring. And I've set out a few of these that are a part of a different presentation that I've done where I've gone through each one of them. But we'll scroll through a couple of them on here, and when we find one that we think might be interesting, yeah, you see the method of my madness, yes. That we'll get your views on it. So the first one that I've picked that the folks on their computers are seeing on their screen right now, even though we're looking at it on ours, and there's no projector in this room through the magic of time delay, is one from English. And the title of this one is Creators and Innovators, Endangered Species. This is going to address the ISTE NETS 1 for creativity and innovation, particularly the one about applying existing knowledge to generate new ideas or products or processes. And the description or the prompt here for us as the teachers doing this project says, asks, doesn't creativity and innovation require freedom? Doesn't information want to be free? How do people making a living being creative, how can they make a living being creative if their work can be copied and distributed without compensation? Who is it that owns the intellectual property anyway? The authors, the publishers, the consumers, the customers? What we're asking the students to do is to create a multimedia presentation that illustrates the most common violations of the rules governing intellectual property, trademark, copyright, fair use, plagiarism, and to present responsible alternatives. And the strategy that we're asking the students to use from Marzano's strategies is the one of identifying similarities and differences to enhance the students' understanding of and their ability to use knowledge by having them create mental models of this and see how things are alike and different. Now, I know that in my bag I have a book by David Thornburg called When the Best is Free, and this is for the benefit of the viewers who don't already know your open source championship. So it's an interesting balance, and with that set up for you, David, take it away.
Well, I think that one of the critical things to understand here is that one of the major inhibitors to creativity is the current copyright law. Because anytime a student wants to do a mashup or take a piece of something from one place and expand on it and turn it into something brand new, somebody has to sit down and say, well, does this constitute fair use or does it not? We're now at a point where, because of all the electronic media, materials that are copy protected, you will end up violating the law just by virtue of breaking the copy protection, even if the material itself is in the public domain. In other words, and please understand this, if you buy, let's say, a copy protected copy of Shakespeare, an ebook of Shakespeare, and you're not allowed to go in and edit it because it's been copy protected, even though the content is copyright free, by virtue of breaking the encryption, you have violated current copyright law. This is absolutely stupid, because the people who are benefiting from this are not the authors. The authors aren't getting a dime. Shakespeare's been dead since the 1600s. And he doesn't leave much of an estate, to my knowledge.
No.
And so his material is clearly in the public domain, but largely because the Walt Disney Enterprise never wants to see Mickey Mouse go into the public domain. They keep extending the life of copyrights. They keep passing all of these bizarre bills, and it really creates a huge problem. Now, Lawrence Lessig, who is a copyright attorney and a very brilliant man, is a huge fan of the Creative Commons licenses. I took a whole bunch of my materials, most of my white papers that I write, I release under Creative Commons license. And this means that anyone who gets a copy of that is free to repost it. They're free to do not everything with it, but some things with it. For example, they can make reference to it and they can post it on their own website. They can distribute it in its entirety without contacting me. I'm retaining rights for the repurposing of that material myself, which is why I only grant rights to the entire document, not pieces of it. But most people don't want to do anything with it except read the whole piece, so for them it's great. And it takes a load off my shoulders. I've had universities contact me saying, we want to use this particular paper, and would you please sign this agreement? And I said, no, I don't need to sign the agreement. It's under Creative Commons license. Go ahead and use it. And they say, oh, thank you, because they have an entire department that just deals with intellectual property rights. That said, the thing that students need to understand is that when they borrow material, when they are making reference to other material, they must give credit for it. They have to give proper citations. And all the citation technologies that exist today, whether it's APA or anybody else, have figured out how to do this, not just for printed material, but for electronic material as well. That's the thing that students need to understand, is the ethical bound of making sure that they are not passing someone else's work off as if it was their own. And that has always been important and will always continue to be important. But as for the ability of a student to do a mashup where they take a little clip of music from here and a speech from somebody over there and find that the rhythm of the speech happens to fit the rhythm of the music, it wouldn't be cool to put these two together. Well, it would be cool, or it might be cool, and they should at least have the freedom to experiment with that, to try it. So I think we have, in this quest to protect, not the authors, because the authors barely get squat, okay? Can we say squat?
I think we can say squat. We can't squat, but we can say it.
The authors don't get a lot. That's the publishers, it's the other people who get the money. And we need, and I'm happy for people to get money. That's not a problem. I like getting money too, and I haven't been getting a lot of that. So I like that. But the question is, what do I get paid for? I get paid for my ideas and the expression of those ideas, typically in professional events that are hosted by a client, and the client pays me, and it works out just fine. I get paid when people buy copies of my books. I just wrote a book on...
Show us your book, David.
I just wrote a book on STEM education. It's called STEM Education from Sputnik to the 22nd Century. And I think this is a book that needed to be written. It hasn't existed. And so I took the time to write it and get it published. And I do expect to get compensated for it. But it's a reasonable price. It's not like a textbook that people charge $75 to $100 per copy for a textbook, which is obscene. Okay. And so I think that the publishers need to be really cautious here as they perpetuate these copyright models, because it's going to start to backfire. And it's already starting to backfire in textbook publishing. California, who has run completely out of money for education apparently, has decided, actually the governor decided, Governor Schwarzenegger decided that they were going to use open source textbooks. They're created under the Flexbook model by an organization called CK12.com, I believe is their web address. You can certainly find it. Just Google CK12 and you'll find it. And their textbooks that have been assembled by people who actually work in the fields are really elegant, beautifully illustrated, very well done, and they are available to anybody for free as a PDF file. The incremental cost of manufacture for the textbook is zero because it's a download. And so if you are willing to have students get their textbooks on PDF files and it doesn't cost anything, why not do that? Well, an answer to that is, well, what if the quality isn't any good? And so there was a study done between the quality of the physics textbook for high school that was done by CK12 and a similar offering from one of the companies owned by Pearson. And what was found in that study is that those two books were not equally good. They really weren't, okay? The Pearson book only missed, I think, 10 or 15 of California state standards. And the open source textbook missed 5, I believe, of them. Oh, wait a minute. That's better.
That's better.
Oh,
yes.
darn.
This is one case where the smaller number is better, David.
Oh, okay. Well, so in that case, free was better. And that's why my book was called When the Best is Free. I do not believe that children should have anything less than the very best learning tools. When it comes to software, for example, if the trade-off for free software was that it wasn't as good as a commercial title, why use it? So all the titles that I talk about in that book are at least as good as the commercial products. And we're starting to see school districts all over the country, certainly San Diego, some parts of Indiana, making heavy, heavy use, other states as well, making heavy use of these free materials. Now, what about commercial vendors? We need to have commercial vendors because they're going to provide those elements, those tools for which there's too small a market for a big company to come in, and it's their creativity that you're really paying for. It comes back to creativity again. So you take a look, and I'm just going to give an example here of a wonderful company called Tech for Learning out in San Diego. And they do absolutely glorious software for kids. Wonderful stuff, worth every penny. And schools, if they start using free software for commodity things like word processing, spreadsheets, stuff like that, I mean, ho-hum, right? Have more money left over to get products from these smaller companies that are really very clever, very creative, and very geared to specific educational objectives. One of the most successful companies over the long term who is marveling at their success because they never thought it was going to happen was Inspiration. Inspiration started out purely as a commercial tool for corporate audiences, and it got adopted by some schools who just fell in love with it. And as a consequence of that, they've been in business since the 80s, if memory serves. They have just continued to do knockout products. Well, there'll always be markets for companies like that. And the existence of free software, they're never going to have to worry about the competition from that. So, yes, everybody needs to be compensated in some way. The people who are developing the free materials, in many cases, their compensation comes from pride of authorship. That's one source. A second source is a lot of people who are developing commercial products. I mean, things like OpenOffice, for example, are the primary end users of those products. There's a bank in Brazil called Itaú, and that bank has several people whose full-time job, they're paid by the bank, is to help maintain the quality of OpenOffice. Why? Because every branch in the entire country of that bank uses that tool. So it's to their interest that that tool has as few bugs as possible and has all the features. And the fact that everybody else has access to the same tool, well, so what? Because the other people who are looking at that tool may find bugs that this one group didn't find, and they'll report them or maybe even fix them.
So it sounds like creativity and innovation is a huge aspect that touches every single piece of teaching and learning in the digital age, both our instructional design, the materials we use, the way we distribute them, the way we prepare our kids to create them. It's just absolutely, absolutely powerful.
Absolutely, it's powerful.
I want to thank you so much for your time today, David, in joining with us with this conversation. We look forward to future ones as we go down this road. I'm sure that folks are going to be hitting rewind and going back to hear some things that you said again, because they bear repeating. But thank you very much
Thank you
for being here with us today.
Thrilled to be here.
Right.
Thank you.